Hi, this is Justin McQuerry, and I've got a full breakdown from the 2024 Pro Men's Unbound Gravel Race for you today. This is definitely long form, as we'll dive into just about every aspect of my preparation for this event, how my race unfolded, and what it was like to be competing in the biggest gravel race in the world, while also managing my diabetes. I have the section segmented in the timeline below, and I will also have a link to my full race POV footage in the description as well. Let's dive in. The Unbound Gravel Race is arguably the biggest and most prestigious gravel event in the world. This is top 2 in the Lifetime Grand Prix and features an international field of athletes, including the current UCI Gravel World Champion, plenty of former World Tour athletes, a former Olympic champion, monument winners, and a whole lot of other fast folks. This race takes place in Emporia, Kansas at the start of June, covering 200 miles of gravel and minimum maintenance roads in rural Kansas. In 2024, this race took a northerly route, which has more elevation, steeper climbs, and rougher roads than the 2 preceding years of more southern routes. Specifically notable in Unbound is that outside help and support is only allowed at 2 designated feed zones or aid stations, the first coming at mile 70 and the second coming at mile 148, with 2 neutral water oases at miles 42 and 114. This means that riders need to carry enough food and technical supplies to support themselves throughout the event and strategically plan their resupply points to be as efficient as possible throughout the race. As an athlete with diabetes in a 200-mile race, there are a few extra preparations I have to consider while racing, and I'll detail those a little bit later in this recap. My equipment setup can be broken into 3 main parts: the bike setup, the body setup, and the Feedzone setup. Bike-wise, I'm racing on the Ibis Haka MX, Bird Sparrow wheels, Maxxis tires, a SRAM Mullet 1x drivetrain, and a Garmin Edge 540. I don't want to tiptoe around the fact that I'm a supported and sponsored athlete, which may make my praise for my setup sound a bit sales pitchy, but being a gravel privateer, I have the opportunity to ride equipment I want to ride and work with companies I want to work with, and I am speaking from my years of experience on the road when I say I'm on one of the best all-around setups out there. Frame-wise, I'm on the Ibis Haka MX, geo that's close enough to what I've been racing on the road for years so that the bike feels agile and snappy while still being slack enough for the Unbound North course. Wheel-wise, I'm on what I think are the fastest wheels in gravel, the Bird Sparrow Carbons, renowned for their less than conventional Dyneema spokes. It's hard to speak about just how much of a performance advantage this unconventional spoke technology adds, but racing, and specifically racing on gravel, is all about the ability to push big power for long durations over less than smooth terrain, and both of these aspects take a huge toll on your body. Suspension or excessively compliant tires and wheels could help here, but have downsides like heft and could be power sapping. But this is where Bird enters the chat with their rope-esque spokes that are super light and more compliant than standard spokes, which results in taking a huge chunk out of the toll the body takes on any given gravel race. It might sound a bit overboard, but I really am so stoked with the way these wheels ride and race, and it's one more notable differentiation in a realm of fast wheels. Tire-wise, I rode 40C Maxxis Ramblers front and rear, with gravel Cushcore inserts in both as well. I think my only mistake in bike setup was in tire size, as I had 45s on the day before and opted to go down a size thanks to some Friday mud that I mistakenly thought would not dry up enough for race day. Tread-wise, super stoked with the Ramblers, and I think my setup would have actually been perfect for the race this year had I opted for the wider tire option on race day. Running a SRAM Axis 1x Mullet drivetrain, 48-tooth chainring up front, and a 1052 cassette in the rear, and Hope RX4 4-piston brake calipers. May opt for a larger chainring at next year's Unbound, but the 48 did the job pretty dang well this year for the pro race speeds. Garmin is not a sponsor of mine, but I think it's worth noting that I ran the Edge 540 because I was able to load a plug-in so that I could see my blood glucose numbers on my head unit all race long. As an athlete with diabetes, having access to blood glucose numbers in real time is a huge game changer, and the ability to see the data my continuous glucose monitor is reporting on my head unit so that I don't need to take my hands off the bar is a real factor in my race. In addition to the full bike setup, you need to bring some tools, tubeless plugs, CO2s while you're racing to fix any mid-race mechanicals or flats that happen away from the aid stations. I had 3 tubeless plugs taped to my frame, mounted on the inserter and ready to go if needed. These press-a-cycle plugs screw into the middle of the tire levers they make, but the threads have enough of a platform to be pushed in with a gloved hand in a race day situation. Had a spare tube, pocket ratchet, extra tubeless plugs, and 2 CO2 cartridges mounted with the inflation nozzles in my saddlebag a Moosepacks race day prototype that's securely mounted and quick to access, in addition to 2 more pre-mounted CO2 cartridges in my pockets. This left my pockets almost entirely empty and ready for all the nutrition I needed to bring for the 200-mile race. I made a short video breaking down both my aid station stops already, which is linked below, but my aid stops were pretty straightforward. I planned to carry most of my food from the start, just picking up fresh bottles, a hydration pack, ice socks, and potentially an extra gel or 2 at each stop. I started the race with just 3 bottles and planned to pick up 2 bottles and a 2-liter hydration pack at aid 1, and then dump this pack and finish with 3 fresh bottles picked up at aid 2. I also planned to grab ice socks at each stop and drink a bottle of mix while I was at the stop if I had time. Diabetes and nutrition wise, my plan was to consume about 120 to 130 grams of carb per hour and maintain an optimal blood glucose all race long. As I mentioned earlier, my Garmin was showing my continuous glucose monitor data, so I could make sure I was eating on time and my blood sugar was staying where I wanted it to be. Consuming a huge amount of carbohydrates each hour of the race is difficult in itself and might make the diabetes management side of things even trickier, but it's almost a requisite now to be at the peak of athletic performance and competing with the best athletes in the world. Apart from this, my racing and nutrition plans are just the same as anyone else in the race who is not managing diabetes, and I'm racing just the same, just with the added consideration of blood sugar management. Nutrition-wise, a majority of my carbohydrates were going to come through fluids and gels with just a few pieces of solid food. I started with all my solid food and gels in my pockets and 3 bottles with mix. Food-wise, I had 2 refillable gel flasks with a maple syrup honey concoction I make, 12 gels, mostly Martin, and a few untapped packets, and 3 Clif Z bars, all in the pockets. This is definitely a lot of food to bring in the pockets, but I wanted to make sure I had enough food on me to prevent any emergencies if I happen to have a Feedzone mishap. I had mix in all of my bottles except the last bottle of just water, and mix in my hydration pack that I picked up at the first aid station. I planned to consume a total of around 10 bottles of mix, the 2-liter hydration pack, with water coming just at the end, primarily for dumping on myself and cooling to help with the ice socks I was picking up as well. Race morning started for me with a 3:30 a.m. wake up so that I could take insulin with enough time ahead of my carb-heavy breakfast to prevent a massive blood sugar spike and allow this food to digest ahead of the 5:50 a.m. start time. I rolled to the start about 30 minutes before and was able to line up right at the front just behind the first row of athletes who were going to get a call up. Race started extremely aggressively and seemed much more reminiscent of a road race than a 200-mile gravel slog until an early breakaway was established about 10-15 miles into the race. Things seemed to calm down here for just a little bit ahead of the first section of minimum maintenance road coming around mile 25 that I had not reconned before the race. I was not in great position at this first decisive section, but didn't panic when wheels started to ride away as I was getting caught behind slower riders, because I also saw that I was around some really fast guys and other top athletes, most notably Matt Beers and Howard Grotz. Matt and his teammate came by me with some speed, and I was able to hop on this small train and get back into the lead group of about 60 to 70 riders. This lead group stayed together, coming through the first water oasis that no one stopped at, and the pace started to lift again on the next section of minimum maintenance road leading into aid station 1. Again, another dose of bad positioning led me right off the back of the group, but I was dropped this time with my former teammate and good friend Parker Kaiser, and we caught back in just a few miles before aid station 1. Aid 1 was hectic. I made a short video breaking down this aid stop and aid 2, which is linked below, but I made this a super quick stop of just 23 seconds and quickly got back on the gas to maintain my position in this main peloton with all of the race favorites. I gassed it too hard coming out of aid 1 and was on the ropes on the hills leaving this stop, and then lost contact with the main peloton through the only muddy section of minimum maintenance road in the race. Rode solo for a very short while, getting passed and dropped by none other than Greg Van Avermaet, and was scooped up by a chase group of 6 riders, including Howard Grotz and Drew Dillman. Dillman seemed the most motivated out of this chase group, and the 2 of us kept on the gas through another little hilly section and then found ourselves chasing alone. Dillman was on some good form at this point in the race and actually dropped me coming out of the Little Egypt section, but waited up for me, and we kept picking off riders, including the current gravel world champ, Rade Mohoric, who had mechanicaled out of the race. Drew and I picked up Truman Glasgow and Coney Lucer, and the 4 of us eventually rolled up on a big group of riders.
You guys all right? Yeah. All right.
Including Thomas Decker, Tobin Norton Blatt, and a few other fast folks. Dillman wanted to just blow past these guys, but a large group came together after a little bit of Drew's antagonization. His chase group grew to about 12 riders, and we were rotating smoothly and all ended up rolling into Aid 2 together for a much calmer stop. Shortly after Aid 2, our chase group got on the gas properly, going towards the finish fast. With the remainder of the race seemingly tame and easy course-wise, we were in a head-down smashing type of chase, and unfortunately that came back to haunt a few of us. With about 25 miles to go, the two riders in front of me hit what I think was the last actual rock on the course, a brick-shaped chunk embedded in the road, and at speed I was unable to avoid this as well. Both of the riders in front of me flatted immediately, but I was able to ride for a short while before I had to stop and inflate. I noticed the tire continuing to deflate and debated just riding on the flat and on the insert, but stopped again to fill up and caught back in again, but then had to stop a third time after the pace increased in the last hour of racing and realized I was not going to be able to recatch a third time. This third time stopping, I saw the rim had a small crack and jostled the sealant around so that it could seal properly, and it actually held this time. The fact that this wheel held up for the last hour of racing with a cracked rim really speaks to the construction and integrity of this wheel and unconventional spoke setup, and I really don't think I would have been able to finish this race had I been on anything less sound than the birds. Hitting a rock square on at over 20 miles an hour is enough to blow up just about anything, and the fact that I was able to keep racing after doing this puts another check mark in my book for these guys. I rode solo from this third stop until about 5 miles to go when the next chase group on the road caught me. I was definitely demoralized at this point, knowing that I blew my own shot at a much better result due to a lapse in concentration, and I was debating not sprinting at all going over the final hill with 1 mile to go. Our group blew apart around the last turn, and then I started my sprint just a touch too late. Not catching the rider who started sprinting with about 250, 300 meters to go, finishing second out of this group. End result, a 53rd on the day with a time of 9 hours, 54 minutes, and 50 seconds. The normalized power of 284 watts, average speed of 20.5 miles per hour, 8,741 kilojoules spent, and a total of 547 TSS. Overall, I'm relatively pleased with this for my first ever attempt at Unbound, while I am slightly bummed on mechanically out of the next chase group on the road, which ended up racing for 41st and contained a lot of the athletes I have watched race for years. This is hugely motivating for races to come later this season and for a shot at Unbound Redemption next year. If you made it this far, thank you for watching, and be on the lookout for more race videos and recaps to come in the next few months. Give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, both help me out a lot and help me make more videos about bike racing across the world. Peace.